The sun's shining just in between a little bit of the pouring, thunderous rain that's been happening here in southern Alberta. And here I am sitting across from my friend, the President, Lawrence Gervais. Folks, I'm Ross Memphis Pambrun. Thank you to Alex Kusteruk, whose beautiful music brings us in and likely finishes the show for us. And you're going to hear lots more of Alex as the summer comes along. So, folks, just want to say thank you. Father's Day has come along. It's National Candy Month. It's National Flag Week. If you're watching this show, you'll see that I have my Métis flag here right in front of me. I'm wearing my less traditional country western shirt as the Stampede is going to be rolling in on us here very quickly. And I got a lot of country shows and places that I'm playing here in the next little while. And all of our thoughts are still going out to anybody whose families and friends and the rest of the world affected by the Ukraine war. And as well, a tragic loss this day, which hits close to home for me, as a loss of a firefighter in a building collapse in Philadelphia. So our prayers and thoughts are with each one of those people in the family. But Lawrence, let's talk a little bit about the things that are happening down here and the pouring rain. Because, you know, last week when we were chatting a little bit, there was some conversation afterwards about you running a marathon. Come on now. When and where did that happen?
Well, it wasn't a marathon. It was a half marathon. And it was around UBC. And they had the worst windstorm in history, and trees were everywhere, and it was raining, and they still managed to put on the event. We all ran it. But yeah, we're pretty wet at the very end of it.
You know, I used to love the notion when I was seemingly younger, and you'd be running around and the rain would just be pouring down. You're running through puddles. Your feet were soaking wet. It was like an extra challenge. Yeah, now even if it looks like there's rain 1,000 miles in the distance, I can come up with an excuse.
Yeah, it was pretty tough, but I did it. You know, feet pretty wet, but.
Well, congratulations. Lots of things to talk about today, Lawrence. The CBC, there's like 3 different articles that I was reading here this last week. One of them was there's a First Nation group, and it's encouraging artists to sell more NFTs. Now, I don't know how strong your familiarity is with NFTs, but in the world of cyber innovation and such, I sort of read about this stuff a lot, but they're called non-fungible tokens. And essentially, you're buying the notion that you own something digitally. So, for example, let's just say the Louvre goes, hey, we're going to sell an NFT, and maybe they already have, of the Mona Lisa, the picture of the Mona Lisa. Well, in the records of how data is managed in the blockchain, you can look back and it would say, oh, Ross Pambrun bought the Mona Lisa, and here's the digital version of it, and here's when, you know, he bought it. And technically you could, if somebody ever wanted to use the data that you had purchased, they would owe you some right, or at least some comment that here's who owns it, right? It's like you own this copyright of it. But I don't know. At the end of the day, we're seeing cryptocurrencies just collapsing. Digital coins right now are struggling. You know, and if you own something digital, do you really own it?
Very bizarre way to do business, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
You know, it's like music publishing and all that stuff. And when you get into that, and when you own the rights to the music, you know, that's what really killed the Beatles, because, you know, that whole notion of using their music, and Michael Jackson was owning it and then selling it to commercials to be used on air. And Paul McCartney and them were upset because it devalued their true intent of those music, right?
Right.
And I think we're moving into that area of digital business and who has rights to what, right? It's very odd.
Well, and at the NBA basketball, the competition, we're just the showmanship, they're doing dunks, and one of the guys gave a phone with the camera on to one of the judges, and the reason why he was doing that was because he wanted this person to videotape it, and then he was going to sell the NFT so that somebody could, you know, as they saw the actual dunk happen, he's now filmed it saying, who wants to buy this? So they're creating content in a way of just something to sell. And I mean, everybody's doing it right now in order to try and just capitalize on maybe disposable income of rich people who are looking to just say, maybe I don't own this piece of art, but I own the first real digital picture of it. Maybe there is value to that.
Well, maybe there's value to, you know, when Trudeau fell down those stairs, like, and then people shared it and shared it and shared it. Well, maybe you should buy the rights to him when he fell down those stairs. Right?
Lawrence, at some point, you and I are going to have to sell each podcast as its own NFT. I would imagine, let's look at it this way. We're coming up on 100 episodes. My math isn't great, but if we sold each episode for $1 million, we would have $1 billion. So if anybody's listening out there and you have your first offer on one of the episodes that we've done, you want to put some purchase an NFT, let's have a conversation. Lots of stuff on its way, Lawrence. June 23rd is the golf tournament, the Region 3 golf tournament. Let's talk about that, because shortly after that, we're on our way to Stampede.
Well, also Metis Fest is the day after, right? And I think you're playing up there at the crossing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. So Apple Creek here in Airdrie is where the June 23rd golf event is going to be occurring. You're right. Metis Fest happens 24th, 25th, and probably a bit of the 26th. And I am playing on the 25th. So I'm really looking forward to that. The Stampede kicks off, I think it's July 8th, but we're having our barbecue on July 15th. And you know, Lawrence, we've had tremendous turnout when it comes to that barbecue.
Oh yeah. It was huge. I think during COVID, we decided to do one event, right? And we picked the Stampede barbecue, and there was probably about 500 people in that parking lot, right?
Oh, it was full.
Yeah.
Yeah, something we're going to have to really be conscious of this year is ensuring that all the barbecues are up and running and they're set up to be hot and ready to go, because great turnout by our community. Had a recent mixer, and our next business mixer. So we had one this week, which I attended, and it was just fun and fabulous. July 21st is going to be our next mixer. It's usually around the third Thursday of every month. And I think this is appropriate because it'll give us a few days after Stampede in order to get ourselves prepared. And then right after that is Postage, just north of Saskatoon. Great history in Postage. And I think is it a federal or is it more of a provincial park?
It's a federal park, yeah.
It's got to be a federal
National
park,
Historic Site, sorry.
Yeah, National Historic Site. And they do a great job of showcasing the colonial relationship and the rebellions at the time and of the late 1800s. Highly recommend it. And yes, I'm fortunate. I'm actually going to be emceeing Postage this year on the Alberta Day. I think that's on the 25th.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that weekend, and I'm sure I'll bring it up as we move a little bit closer. Exciting, Lawrence. The Army has had its first Indigenous Commander. Lieutenant General Jocelyn Paul assumed the post this past Thursday, taking over for Major General Henri St. Louis, who's been the acting top soldier ever since. So this gentleman, who has quite a storied history of his participation in NATO, is now the highest ranking Indigenous member of the military. He was a member of the Huron-Wendat First Nation group from Wendake, Quebec, and he often speaks about his culture and his personal history that shaped him as a soldier and an individual. You know, I'll have to, pick George's brain. My father, the retired Sergeant Major who participates in a lot of our events, just to see, was he ever thinking that there'd be a time that, or when did he think it was going to happen? And I hope it doesn't seem as though it's a priority that it happened. Our shout out to our fighting soldiers and those who protect us. It's more important that we recognize their service than worry so much about recognizing them as individuals, because it seems like the history being we work together as a team, and we are a team.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, George is probably part of that generation that, was just starting to recognize themselves as being Indigenous. I don't think they looked at the ranks, until I think that's something new that's been happening. Whether, it's congratulations to them who are getting to that level. But, we hope they do a good job.
Well, and it's always been a challenge, it seems, because I know George has participated in the Aboriginal veterans, and then now I think they're Indigenous veterans. And the idea that after World War I, I think, and II, that if you were Indigenous and fighting, you served your country, but when you left service, well, you're not really going to fit in anywhere other than we're just going to send you back and you're not going to receive any of the same
benefits,
support and benefits that was provided. Hopefully we're getting past that conversation and we're starting to recognize the fact that these are anybody, man, woman, or LGBTQ who is serving is there to serve. And thank you for that, the commitment that you've made and that personal sacrifice. And thank you to your families. Those are one of the groups that are often overlooked, as those individuals who stay home while somebody's sent off to serve. Something exciting, I think, too, we need to make sure we shout out to. CBC has a new Indigenous Pathways to Journalism Development program that's happening. So it's a full-time 9-month learning and development opportunity for all this, for the 6 First Nations, Inuit, Métis candidates who want to develop practical skills as a storyteller in the CBC newsroom. So there's really no requirements in order to get started. And their goal and sort of the mandate when it comes to CBC is, in this case, the Canada's public broadcaster, is to learn, work, grow, and create. Those are sort of the founding or the fundamental building blocks of what they're trying to encourage, so that we continue to share all conversations.
Well, that's interesting, mandate. Where does fake news get into that little area? Which category?
Some of that is CNN and Fox. And, the hardest thing, I think, for anybody in the world of journalism is how to capture the honest truth. I mean, sometimes the only people who know the honest truth are those people who are actively involved. So when you're the broadcaster who's trying to publicize it or identify it, it's your interpretation sometimes. And I think that's where fact checking seems to be a new phenomenon that happens on web pages all day long. Who fact checks what was visualized, what was seen, what the content was? Otherwise, the world of, do we just get our news from Facebook? Well, that's not necessarily going to be the right answer. Seems like too many people I know come back to me and say, oh yeah, that's just totally made up.
Yeah. But I mean, people question so many things, like we can, just dissect people's news stories. But sometimes it gets in the way of what they're doing. They're just sending the message out, right?
Right.
But, sometimes people just want to discredit them just so they can further their agenda.
Yeah, you're right. In the end, sometimes people go out of their way just to do harm or discredit. That's the issue right now in the world of computers and cyber technology, is that some of these malicious actors are just out there to cause harm to see if they can.
Yep.
Well, a lot of times all we want to do is put pictures of our cats and dogs and send them over to somebody else. And all of a sudden, some malicious act occurs. Yes, there are people out there who are trying to do real business and who are trying to do real education. But for me and you, for most of the time, it's usually we're just sending pictures of cats and dogs back and forth at each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
who's out there to create harm that way?
Yeah, but I mean, the people just do that. I mean, they do that in our community too. They'll send mixed messages so they further their agenda, and that's
right.
Sometimes if you have to be a little bit on top of things in order to kind of relieve that tension. But there are people that do that, and that's probably in every community, right?
You're right. You're absolutely right. In every community, be wary of who's making that post and what's the intent behind it.
That's right. Yeah.
Is at the end of the day, a lot of times, there's no real public debates anymore. There's no real conversation. All it ends up being is a comment, thread at the bottom of some either social network, post, or bottom of some media thing. And it seems as though these people think this is where I have a voice. Well, just sending in a blind response in a comment box is not real involvement.
Yeah.
This is where you need to start to step in and start to participate so that we understand what's behind a lot of your actions. This is kind of fun that I was reading about, Lawrence, that there's new stamps that are coming out. And I think they're actually going to be launched here on June 21st on Indigenous Day. Day Walker Peltier, Jose Kuzagak, and in our case of the Métis conversation, Harry Daniels. So 3 Indigenous leaders chosen to be featured on the new set of stamps, available on June 21st, National Indigenous Peoples Day. The stamps are paying tribute to their achievements, their commitment, their contributions of these 3 Indigenous leaders, and Canada Post is releasing them. So, I've seen a picture of the Harry Daniels one, and it looks great. Mm-hmm. I think these are, very small but very important recognitions to, again, each government sort of role within reconciliation.
Yeah, I mean, he's sort of becoming the more contemporary, modern day leader, that we're recognizing now. And before it was Cuthbert Grant, and then it went to Lou Riel, and now we have, Harry Daniels for all the impacts he's made. But, and I'm witness to it now. It's great.
Mm-hmm. Right, and we're going to be conversing about the Harry Daniels decision for a long time, and how it's that posthumous award continues to change the landscape of the relationship of communication between not just Métis people amongst themselves, how we're approaching municipalities, how we approach provincial government, and how we approach the federal government in order to help establish better communication systems between these 2 organizations.
Well, what it does, it established that fiduciary responsibility that Canada had and forgot about, and just don't talk about it, and they put their hands to their ears. And people who can't see me, I'm putting my hands to my ears.
Yeah.
But that was the norm since 1885, and now that the Daniels decision came in, it reestablished us from 1867 till now. Where was the fiduciary responsibility? And it holds Canada a little bit accountable to that. And hopefully the other governments will kind of clue in too.
And, it's too often, like you said, people just put their fingers in their ears. But now, let's hope that it never should have been that hard to have the conversation, but it was. But now it is happening. It is there. It's probably that time, Lawrence. We've changed up our sound as per one of some of the guests who had emailed in saying that siren we've been sending it off is a little bit loud and annoying. The light came on. Let's talk about plants, Lawrence. Let's talk about Indigenous plants. What do you got for us today?
I have the Nettles, so I know we're going to show something here on the screen. So it helps you with if you have phlegm in your lungs, or it also purifies your blood. So for the phlegm, you use it in a tea. It contains a lot of iron, and it cooks up in a delicious green for the table. And the blood purifier is more it can be used as greens just like a tea also, and it'll also purify your blood. So not only you're purifying your blood, it's clearing up the phlegm in your lungs too. So I know we're almost here out of cold season. People might want to use this. So.
Well, and the idea that it's often referred to as a stinging nettle, before you just go out there and grab it and start rubbing it all over your face, be aware that this will often leave a bit of a mark. The
and I should also I should also remind people, if you don't know how to handle these plants, please talk to an elder or a medicine person. Right?
Yeah, and don't just rely on Google for everything. But I had been looking at a little bit. Yeah, the idea that some of the above ground parts are used for diabetes, but they're typically 2 to 4 meters tall. The ingredients might reduce swelling and increase urination. The leaves are sometimes eaten and cooked, but folks, before you just decide you're going to all of a sudden become an herbologist and manage all your own care and treatment by eating every plant out there and boiling it up, make sure you consult with some naturopath somewhere. Consult with your own MD, your own physician. Say, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about these? Because, we don't need people going out there climbing through muskeg in order to try and dig out cattails and things. And people are going to get stuck. So, yes, these are all just points of conversation. when it comes to indigenous plants. Paul McCartney turned 80, Lawrence. Wow. Now, a lot of it I heard is because he ate and drank a lot of stinging nettle.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Lots of rat root and sage. Yeah.
I can't remember. It was a few months ago, and I was reading about this big super artist. I can't remember who he was, but he was at an event, and Paul McCartney was there, and they had asked him. Somebody at the event had asked him, "Hey, you're a pretty big deal. Like, do you ever feel underwhelmed, overwhelmed, like when you're around Paul McCartney?" It might even have been Bruce Springsteen or something like that. And he just said to this person, that guy, and he's pointing at Paul McCartney, that guy was a Beatle. Like, there is almost no measure, because it doesn't matter how big you are. Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, the two remaining, they were Beatles. Like, how incredible is that? Mm-hmm. And Paul McCartney's still doing it. His show the other day, 80 years old, and still singing romantic crooning songs. I was recently interviewed on CJWE again, released our latest song, Last Storm. And I pointed out that, thank them. John McCartney is such a great DJ and so fun to listen to. And we're talking, influences, this and that. And I made this comment sort of that a lot of people in my band sort of, well, you're kind of like Paul McCartney, always writing relationship songs. And I'm like, oof, that's, I shouldn't even be within a mile of conversation when they use Paul McCartney's name. Like, I don't know who should be, he's such a big influence in the world of music. But I thought that was kind of cool.
Well, they're one of the bands that, he was one of the songwriters that understood that music is always changing, and he would adapt every time that happened to keep everything, going, right?
And artists have to be, trying new things and, making the commitment to not just doing the same thing over and over and over. Yeah. There are artists out there who have made a living on it, but then that just sort of becomes it. You make a living, you're not really advancing yourself as an artist. And I struggle with that. I get into this habit of where I'm always just writing these 4/4 country western songs about he found her, lost her, and what's happening next. But yeah, to break that mold. But when you surround yourself with other really good musicians who say, yeah, let's try songwriting to this kind of a timing or this kind of a sound. Hey, you know what? That's what makes the journey kind of fun for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and his ability to construct songs, very like a very simplified way, and just creating those really good melodies and those hooks, right? He was very good at that.
And shared the stage there with John Lennon. It was more of it's 50-50. Well, in a lot of cases, it was definitely probably more 90-10, where Paul McCartney had so much influence, but we cannot discount the fact that John Lennon played such a role within the Beatles community. And, always a tragic story whenever you lose an artist, especially in his circumstances. Monkeypox. I don't know if we've really had too much of a conversation. Is this just another little bit of fear mongering that's happening within the news media because they're just still capturing attention? It seems as though most people within any health agency says, well, pretty unlikely, pretty rare, and really doesn't seem like the impacts towards loss of life seems to be that high. It's kind of an ugly looking blistery infection that happens, but it doesn't seem like it's too impactful. Is there a lot of fear going around?
Well, they're also saying that, your regular chickenpox vaccine kind of helps too, right? So if you have that.
That's probably true.
Yeah, but it's also one of those viruses that passes on. You have to be really close, like, almost touching the other person to actually get it. So it's almost like a kissing disease or something like that, right?
Yeah. And I know that there's been quite a bit of fear in the LGBTQ community, and folks, when you're not sure, you're not aware, go talk to your doctor, get involved in that conversation so that you're proactive. Lately I've started seeing that they're doing some of the like monkeypox vaccination clinics, and where I don't exactly know where those are happening, but be aware. This is how you engage. We're all a part of our healthcare systems, as in our national relationship.
The thing is, they're monitoring it. There's no better time right now than to have people monitoring diseases coming out of COVID.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
These people are trained now. They know what they're doing. So
it's not like they're sitting there going, well, what do we do now?
Yeah.
Oh no, now they've really got their eyes open for everything else. But I'd like to continue to see, this is one of the areas, especially in the First Nation community, of the struggle of what's the relationship in the world of treaties and how we support healthcare for individuals different, and how do we incorporate Indigenous practice with sort of the developing Western medicine practices that have happened. I'd like to continue to see, and I know we have talked recently about how there is funding in some of the nursing programs to try and open up positions for Indigenous participants to hopefully then continue to carry the torch of, here are some of the practices. Here we're learning historic practices. Let's try and incorporate them for our elders, our knowledge keepers, and carry that information down to our youth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a real balance between Western medicine and Indigenous holistic healing, right? And, we mention medicines now because it wasn't that long ago. There wasn't as many pharmacies as people think. It's not like one every 2 blocks. Right. You needed to go to a medicine person to be healed. And that was both in a non-Aboriginal sense and an Indigenous sense too. There was always healers in our communities. And we've lost a lot of that because of what we have now. But sometimes Western medicine has kind of taken over some of these medicines too, and reformat to, what they feel is safe and all those things. But sometimes they leave things out. And that's what our elders are always there to say, hey, wait, you're leaving something out that's very, very important in the ingredients.
Mm-hmm. And maybe there are some new ideas that we need to explore going forward, but let's also not forget some of these other things that were tried and true. That's right. And one of the interesting, funny as it was in the stories that came out was Geico had recently been told that they have to pay a payout because from what I understand, there was a couple that was amorous in his vehicle. She ended up getting a STD, a transmitted disease, and then sued his insurance company. And apparently they're looking at a $5 million payout.
Wow. Now, how that will all happen, I'm not too sure. But maybe, Lawrence, we should just jump into your truck. We should eat some stinging nettle and claim, well, we just thought this was a good idea. Right. So if anybody uses that idea, well, the insurance company's going to have heard it here. So now they can't try and use that ploy.
Well, probably golf cart would be better because there's a place around Apple Creek. There might be something.
Because the idea that this is because somebody was injured, as it were, in their vehicle, in a vehicle, and there's insurance. I don't know if this is a loophole. You never want anything unfortunate to befall.
But you'd really have to prove. Wouldn't you have to really prove you got the STD in that vehicle? Like, how would that?
I absolutely.
Is there cameras?
Absolutely.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But I'm probably going to avoid stinging now.
Yeah.
So that's at the latest. It just seems to be one of my recommendations. So, Lawrence, I think we've run out of time.
Thank you to everybody within our Métis community. Thank you to all of our friends who have been listening and everybody behind the scenes. We appreciate all of our comments and we appreciate all the emails that we receive. It's our time to enjoy summer. Let's keep the wheel squeaking. We look forward to our conversation next week. The Squeaky Wheel is brought to you by the Squeaky Wheel Company, co-hosted by the President, Lawrence Gervais, from M&A Region 3, and the Captain, Ross Memphis Pambrun. Our program is broadcast from Calgary, in Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta, which is part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We also acknowledge these lands are the traditional territories of Treaty 7, Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, McCartney, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. You can always reach us for comment about our programming by email at tsw@thesqueakywheel.ca or find us on our website, www.squeakywheel.ca, and our socials. For our comments, it is our focus to recognize all of our First Nations and Indigenous friends, share a connection with Métis settlements, and listen to and show respect to our Métis brothers and sisters and families. Here at the Squeaky Wheel, we give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth for her time she allows us to be here and share her bounty. From all of us at the Squeaky Wheel, Tansi.